Dear Chinth, thank you so much for joining me for this episode on the India China trade imbalance. And that is something I think a lot of us have been worried about. A lot of us talk about it. But sometimes I think there is a bit of a challenge in terms of how to understand it. There is quite a lot which is happening behind the scenes that we probably don't know. And of course, there is a lot of things that we should know and we can and must act upon. Before I begin this episode, guys, please do subscribe to this channel. Check your notifications if you have already subscribed to get notified as soon as I put up a video. That is pretty much every night at 10 o'clock. And of course, yes, if you can, please do help out the dev talks efforts by putting in your contributions directly to me. You can actually just scan the code on the right hand side top of the screen to directly contribute to me, or you can actually become a member by clicking join, or actually send us super stickers or super chats by clicking thanks in your chat box. Thank you so much once again for joining in. Guys, please don't forget to like this video, and that's the most critical thing. Thank you so much. Yesterday, you guys put in a lot of likes. It really helps me to reach a larger audience. So, thanks for that. And let's kind of start up the show on talking about the India China trade imbalance. And that's, of course, as usual, I have a sort of a slideshow to show to you. It'll be a few slides. This is not, I do hope it's not going to be a very long video because it's a lot of economics. A lot of us might not be very well versed with it. Nor am I. I'm not an economist, but I can make a lot of sense of what's happening around. Right. So let me just open up with some figures. So this report I took out from the Government of India website, by the way, of the Trade and Commerce Ministry. This tells us the breakdown of the India-China trade. Now, of course, I can't go through the entire list, but I'll just go through the top few: electrical machinery and equipment parts thereof, sound recorders, reproducers, televisions, and uh, parts of those things have been on the top of the list. So electronic imports are still right on top in terms of what we are buying from China. As a matter of fact, if you look at the columns which are there, the first one tells you November 2021, the second one tells you November 2022, it tells you the percentage growth, it tells you after that, it tells you Jan to November 2021, Jan to November 2022, and the percentage growth year on year. So 19.72% increase in terms of electronics and equipment. Now, this can be consumer electronics, for example, iPhones and so on and so forth. This also can be a whole lot of parts which need a lot of, for the industry within India. So there's a lot that goes inside this particular thing. The second one is, of course, nuclear reactor parts, boilers, machineries, mechanical appliances, and parts thereof. Organic chemicals and API. This is very important for us to know as far as the pharma sector is concerned. Month on month, there was a degrowth of about 2.6%, but year on year, it has gone up by about 19.63%. Plastics and articles. Now, plastics is something very critical because plastic is which is used for whole lot of things. So this is the raw plastic. It's not processed plastic that comes in, because a lot of the stuff happens within India. Fertilizers has gone down, that's why I marked it in green. Year on year reduction of 23%. Iron and steel has gone up by 68.32%. Remember, guys, iron and steel going up tells you also about the industry which is firing up within India as the growth kind of goes forward. So that's something that we need to understand, because this is not just a very simple statistic. So this is something that we will also talk about as we go forward in the show. Then you've got whole lot of articles of iron and steel, vehicles other than railway. Of course, we don't import any railway, aluminium, this, that, and the other. Now, there are certain things that I've marked in red here, which I want us to kind of notice. The first thing is glass and glassware. Now, glass and glassware, ladies and gentlemen, is a complete consumer product. And that's something that we need to acknowledge as Indians, right? Consumer products is one of the top in terms of the list of things which are coming in from China, and this, which I would say not really non-required, but can do without. After that is furniture, bedding, mattresses, mattress supports, cushions. I mean, we can't make cushions in India. And I'm being sarcastic here because a lot of it is dependent on buyers' behavior, right? We've got ceramic products which are coming in. Ceramic is, right up from your toilet bowl to the sink to ceramic plates and stuff like that. Tools, implements, cutlery, spoons. Now, this is all food and beverage and hospitality industry. This thing, I know for a fact, a lot of hospitality professionals actually hit China when they want to open up restaurants and stuff like that. They go buy in bulk and come back. And of course, yes, it is cheaper to a large extent. uh, you know After that, the last line, which is very the last two which I have marked up, is knitted or crochets. Now, these are personal consumption items, and of course the last one is curated pearls or semi-precious stones, again a consumer driven item. Footwear, another consumer driven item. Articles of leather, toys and games, right? There's a bit of a reduction this year in December, which has been seen, and I'll show you the kind of records for that. Articles in apparel, which is basically clothing, and some organic surface active chemicals and stuff like that. Now, importantly, this is something I just wanted to give you a background on so that we can continue our discussion. Just a sort of a refresher, not really relevant to know the numbers, but it is relevant to know the sectors where this particular thing is happening. Now, there are certain reasons why a lot of the trade happened, and this is something I wanted to actually take up with you. Firstly, a large number of firms have started something known as merchanting trade. Merchanting trade transactions, or MTT, as per se, is that the Chinese low cost goods which are produced in China, Indian firms buy those things from China and sell them in international markets. It's like a build to ship model wherein you're buying something from China and giving it off to another country or another, importer or somewhere. Of course, this is all done with a certain margin that is kept for the Indian trader. There's no question in that. And this has been a common practice in FMCG goods between India and China. There is, you know, direct enrouting also which happens. And of course, this creates a little bit of data asymmetrics, as I've written in the last line, which tells you, because the Chinese would say, sent you this much. Our Indian traders will say no, this, that, and the other. You remember in November, this sort of a $12 billion sort of a mystery that had come out. This was a study done then, and it kind of seemed very relevant for us to understand certain areas why the trade levels are so high. The second is something known as high seas sale, where uh, bulk goods are produced by by Chinese manufacturers. Indian traders buy them up, chemicals, plastics, and this and that, and sell them to a third country. I've taken an example of Australia because this is the largest in terms of the HSS statistics that I could find on the Government of India website. Now, interestingly, in both these cases, the first case and the second case, the goods normally don't hit the Indian borders or the Indian waters or anywhere for that matter. It just does not come anywhere close to us. Now, what has happened is, because of the supply chains that have gone to the dump literally because of the COVID pandemic and the Russia Ukraine war, which is taking place, Indian exporters have actually found a little bit of a gap. And this is exactly what is happening with the oil. So, of course, we don't buy oil from China, but just as an example, we buy a large amount of oil, about a million plus barrels from Russia. And it turns out in December, the Americans were the largest importers of Indian oil. So it basically comes into India in one of these offshore refineries. It gets processed and it gets rerouted out. It doesn't come into the system of India, but it actually shows in within the trade of India. And that's something which is very, very interesting to kind of know, that this sort of stuff also happens. A lot of times we actually wonder that all of this is being done by us ourselves. Thirdly, there is something known as free trade and warehousing zones, which are legally a foreign territory as per the SEZ Act of 2005. So what happens is a lot of stuff is bought from China. It's kept in warehouses in various ports and stuff like that. And whenever there is a requirement of a certain importer somewhere who's looking for certain things, it is sold to them. This actually tells you something about Indian traders. And the first two things that I told you, and the third one that I'm telling you here, it tells you that the Indian trader today is getting connected with the market pretty well, and the worldwide market. If he's able to actually do this kind of stuff on the high seas, in free trade warehousing facilities and stuff like that, it tells you that there is a bit of a contact which is building up between the Indian trader and the worldwide importer of a lot of things. Now, this is a statement that the government had put out. The government said that most of the goods imported from China are capital goods, intermediate goods, and raw materials that are used for meeting demand of fast expanding sectors like electronics, telecom, and power in India. The rise in import of electronic components, computer hardware, peripherals, telephone components can be attributed to transforming India into a digitally empowered society. Now, a lot of us will say, "Yaar, Atmanirbhar bolte ho. What is this? You're buying stuff from China and using it in terms of digital India and stuff like that." So, what do? You don't have a manufacturing base of your own at the moment. You can't stop your growth waiting for the manufacturing sector to build up and then हम कुछ करेंगे फिर तो हो गया काम. So what the government is saying right now, if you read between the lines, is what we are doing right now is critical for the industry within India to kind of take off to the point that we need to. Now, of course, as your economy kind of grows up, it will get more and more powerful. So that tells you a little bit, which we will now discuss. Now, the trade with India is useful, as the government said, and I agree with it, to achieve India's strategic developmental objectives. You're looking at doing certain things within a certain time frame. You don't have the ingredients for that entire thing ready with you. So, what are you doing? You're basically importing stuff to get stuff done within your place and move forward, right? While setting an infrastructure base within your country and a manufacturing base within your country, which will do a lot of things for you. So this is what we are doing currently. Addressing this requires enhancing competitiveness of Indian manufacturing, as I was saying, which in turn also relies on imports with China. So this is a catch 22 sort of a situation. You can cut off the imports from China, but your own industry will get hit. There's a big reason for this, guys. Stay on tune and you'll kind of realize why am I saying there is a very big reason for this entire thing to happen the way it is actually happening. So we'll get into that as we go along with this presentation. Making this change is a long-term challenge and will likely lead to a greater imbalance in short term. Now, as the Indian economy kind of picks up, what's going to happen is the imports will kind of go up because you're looking at producing more and more to meet your own demands, to meet the demands of exports, and a whole lot of other things. For example, medicines. Now, India is taking a pole position in terms of pharmaceuticals. The APIs come from China, about 70%, 75% as of date. APIs come from China, but the export is literally around the world. So you need the Chinese imports to come back to come to you so that you can actually meet your export demands which are coming across. This is a in very close link circle, and is one of the things that came out of the whole globalism aspect of it. When this whole globalist agenda actually took off, the thing was about, oh, borderless trade and this and that and the other, without realizing the geopolitical impact of it. And today, when we are realizing the geopolitical impact of it, we are at this particular impasse. Now, considering that while China exports a significant volume of finished goods meant for Indian consumers, India currently exports to China primarily raw materials meant for businesses to process further. So there's a lot of cotton. Chinese actually import a lot of rice. The past 2 years, 3 years, they've not been able to produce the amount of rice that they need. They've taken, as a matter of fact, during the pandemic year 2020, they took a large quantity of rice from us, in spite of the fact that the tensions were really high on the borders at that particular point of time. So countries will do that to meet their immediate need. They will take these decisions and they will actually do certain things that may not be popular. because you're trying to protect your own population. At the end of it, you're trying to take care of your own people. Quite understandable. China can China find a market as large as India to cover its consumer goods sales? That is a big question that we need to ask ourselves. Why am I saying this? Is because let's say the trade is 100 rupees, and the Chinese today, as we know that the economy is kind of going down, every 100 rupees for them is going to be more and more important. Will the Chinese be able to find a market with 1.41 billion people to buy its products? That's something that we also need to understand. Now, on the flip side of it, as I mentioned before, the Indian industry will also be at a disadvantage when it comes to sourcing of goods to be competitive. Now, if you're not able to get the low priced APIs right now, your paracetamol and every other cost will start going up. Because, of course, if you start buying it from somewhere else, you'll have issues. India's part should be to boost its capacity to export more into the Chinese market. Medicines today are in high demand in China. And guys, mind you, a lot of medicines do get exported from India to China via Hong Kong. What the Chinese do is open the packets, reseal them in their own Chinese, packaging and stuff like that, and sell it out to their population. So that's very interesting that the Chinese are doing stuff like this. As a matter of fact, certain you know certain antiviral medicines are actually banned by China. Now those medicines are available in what do you call in Hong Kong, and a lot of people are traveling to Hong Kong to buy those medicines and get cured or whatever it is. So this is a conundrum that the Chinese also face. There are certain places, for example, as I said, medicines. Of course, China is the largest producers of API, but they don't have the capacity to produce the kind of medicines that their population needs. So it's not all glory the other way around as well. Now, action must be to expand the trade faster with other trading partners rather than cutting it with Beijing, and that's something that I say at the moment through a blunt instrument such as trade sanctions. Now, you're gonna damage yourself, right? The minute you say, "Okay, I'm not buying anything from China anymore," you're gonna damage yourself. There are certain important things that are needed for your industry to kind of produce itself, and that we saw in that particular chart. There are certain things we could avoid, and I'll also talk about that. There's an institute that has done a study about that. We'll just brush through it a little bit to kind of understand what we could avoid. We should take advantage of India's excellent growth prospects, and this is something not me, all of us know that. Let's put a stamp to it and not debate it. In the next decade, and concentrating on growing the economy bigger as fast as possible. Once we are the third largest economy, our sanctions and threats will carry greater credibility. Now, this is important. You must understand, for you to, of course, $100 billion is a large amount of money, but if you also have a very strong economy to back you up, the threat of actually cutting off Chinese imports and stuff like that would carry much more weight. Having said that, India was the only country that actually banned Chinese apps. A lot of damage was done to these Chinese companies, Tencent and so on and so forth. When these apps were banned, the total valuation loss, as a matter of fact, within the first year was to the tune of about $6 to $8 billion per company, especially for TikTok, for that matter. TikTok and PUBG and all these companies. So that's something that we need to understand. We're a large consumer base that has a huge impact on whoever's selling us products. Now it's not all gloomy, right? As we would think. December there's been a drop in terms of toy import and jump in exports. So India has been able to set up. A lot of these factories have come up in UP which produce toys, and they've actually started going abroad as well. So the production levels have been very good. Toys don't require that much of technology to kind of produce, and these basically cheap tatty toys that were being sold in India to kids, which were being imported by China. I'll tell you how the Chinese actually infiltrated into the Indian markets when we come a little closer towards the end. It's all not gloomy again. Now, I'll just remove this particular thing so that you guys can read it. Of course, the APIs. Now, API was at about 70% currently, and it was 85% in 2020. So we've actually brought it down. According to Bloomberg, India's imports of API comes at 70%, totaling about $2.4 billion dollars of the total import of 3.56 billion in importing these kind of products. Key APIs have become 12 to 25% costlier. Now, the Chinese, what has happened is, please understand this very carefully, and that's why the APIs are critical. And that's why I think the government is putting a lot of emphasis in terms of ensuring that the APIs are taken care of. Because the Chinese economy has been kind of slow. They've shown a growth percentage, as Jan Shankar was mentioning last night, of what, 1.5, 1.8% reality, and the actual given one is 2.8%. So that's, if you counter inflation, that's pretty much at a standstill. Now, the APIs have gone more expensive because the demands are high and the supplies are low. Now, this could result in a supply chain disruption. Now, if you're not careful, India does have a huge stockpile of its APIs, which is required for its drugs and stuff like that, and which is what fought us through the pandemic, by the way. So, this is dangerous, right? We need to kind of keep a track of this. I'm sure the Indian government is doing whatever it requires, what it requires to be done, because India's exports also depend on what is actually going to happen within this sector. Any decoupling from China must be strategic with a significant policy support. Now, PLI is something which the Indian government has said a lot of criticism can come about it. A lot of things happened, a lot of things didn't. Things aren't like that. They take time. The whole rut that we've been in for the past 20, 30 years is not just going to stand up and go away. And there's a reason why I say 20, 30 years. Probably in the next few slides, you'll realize that. Ad hoc or reactive decoupling could disrupt the entire production range for India, with wide ranges of medicines that currently require ingredients from China, cancer medicines, and a whole lot of things that actually need a lot of basic ingredients that come from China. Initial investment about this is 2021, where India had done about $1.3 billion is already through within the sector, and a lot of things have started, and that's why you do see the reduction of about 15% within 2 years. Now, you know, was it always like this? And I told you there is a reason why we are stuck in this API conundrum today. There was a bill that was passed by the government of India, which is called the Drug Price Control Order. This was in 1995. Looks correct because they were supposed to kind of keep the prices of drugs at a certain level. Now, when you do something like that, you're not able, the profitability of those drug producers are going to go down. What will they do is they will look for cheaper and cheaper raw ingredients. And when you talk about cheap, C for cheap and C for China. That's exactly what happened to us. Past 15, 20, 30 years, we've been doing this. And we've now got into that dastardly habit, right? When you get into something like this, to break this chain is going to take us time. You can't just build up industry and stuff like that. I think if my research tells me correctly, there were about three major drug parks which are coming across Gujarat. There was some issue, political issue in I think Hyderabad or Telangana, one of these places, and there's one coming up in UP. Now again, domestic politics will also play a role and a whole lot of things. India is a an interesting country, if I may. But I think as a whole, the country and the politicians must look at the factor that this is not just beneficial for their local economy, it's also going to be great for the country as a whole, and not actually interfere with these kind of things. But that's just me. I don't want to get into the politics of it, as I don't never on this channel, but it was important for me to mention this particular thing here. Now, let's talk about the big catch. It's a gamble or an Indian opportunity, something that we need to understand. Now, yesterday's discussion about a whole lot of things in terms of the Chinese economy with General Shankar actually brought me to this point, and I said this during the interview as well. The Chinese today want something called a dual consumption or dual circulation. I'm sorry, I always say consumption for some reason. It's dual circulation economy, where one part of the circulation is abroad, which is your exports, and the second part is domestically consumed. Now, what that tells you is that if they want people to buy more and more consumer products within China, for example, a phone maker in China, anyone, me, GP, whatever it is, They, let's say, produce 100 million phones a year. Now the Chinese consumption is, let's say, 10 million. What happens to the 90 million phones? It gets exported. Now when there are going to be less demands in terms of the export, what do you do to keep that company alive? You need to ensure that your domestic consumption is strong. Now I'll relate that to in India in a certain example. Tourism is a very critical thing for us to understand in India. There is a lot of foreign tourists that come into India, but of course, the Indian domestic tourist is very, very strong. The market within India with regards to travel and tourism is very, very strong, and that market has kept the hospitality sector alive, since 2021, right after the pandemic of major lockdowns. So there is a domestic consumption of Indian tourist sector. In China, domestic consumption levels are very, very low. Either the Chinese people like saving their money or buying real estate, which is down in the dump. So you can imagine they're not spending money on a whole lot of other things. I mean, of course, you've seen these pillbox apartments that people stay in Shanghai and stuff like that. They're very, very expensive and a whole lot of things. So they want to go towards a consumer driven economy. That will tell you that the Chinese minimum wages will have to start going up. अब भाई किसी को अगर उसके पास वो बटन वाला फोन है, if he wants to get onto a what do you call an iPhone, he needs to have more money. So your minimum wage needs to go up. Your labor cost will go up. What that tells you is if you start as China increasing your minimum wage, your cost starts going up, which reduces your competitiveness. Now, at a certain point of time, the Chinese used to subsidize all this stuff. The Chinese government would basically say, okay, fine, I don't care if I make 1 rupee per this thing, sell it, I'll subsidize it. How long will the Chinese be able to do that with an economy which is slowing down, not growing, population which is reducing, and a pandemic which is through the country? Understand another thing, and this is just off topic, but you remember, in the first lockdown, Indian government said that we created a whole 5,000 crore industry for masks and PPEs and stuff like that. So did China. Of course, they had a lot of stuff going for themselves in that particular department. 3M and a whole lot of these producers were producing in China itself. Now, understand this: zero COVID had given employment to a whole lot of people, right? A whole lot of industries, antigen tests and those nucleic acid tests and those buds and those plastic tubes and the chemical and the PPE kit and the masks and this and that and those apps and yay and whoa. There was a whole economy which was kind of going behind it. Understand, this is all expenditure which produces economic activity within your country. When Xi Jinping woke up one morning and said no more COVID, zero COVID policy, all that entire industry went to the dump, right? So internal consumption be damned. That's what they did. Now, when the Chinese today are going to raise up their labor costs, how will the Chinese be competitive? Because the major Chinese advantage is what? Chinese produce items cheap. How do they produce cheap? One, they do it by mass, and two, they do it with cheap labor. Now, if you start paying that labor a little more, your competitiveness starts reducing. China is stuck. China is stuck. And that's what exactly General Shankar said yesterday. Considering that India is in the cusp of rapid industrialization, Chinese investments within India are a win-win. A lot of us will say, "Whoa, what is this guy saying?" Well, China wants to stay competitive. It will need to start looking at offshore manufacturing for itself, because it's not going to be able to afford the low-cost thing. It's a two-way street. They cannot go both the ways at the same time. Now, we got news sometime back. Vivo and some other telephone companies, cell phone companies were talking to government of India, and they wanted to set up a manufacturing base within India. Chinese company wants to set up a manufacturing base within India. Now, I'm not an expert with regards to talking about whether this should happen or not. I'm sure the government has a lot more vision and a lot more information about this aspect to take that decision. I don't have that information for me to put a judgment. But the sheer fact that a Chinese company are expressing interest within India to set up manufacturing within India tells you India is getting more competitive and better outputs than China in certain sectors. Mobile manufacturing, of course, we know India's shot up and it's actually gone beyond China. So here is a China who's realizing, okay, these guys have gone beyond us. My costs are going up. Why don't we do something there and figure something out? Interesting. This is a ratings and research acquit. I'm sorry, I messed it up. Uh, which says they did an analysis of India China trade, and they say that 40 subsectors have the potential to lower their import dependency on China. Collectively, these sectors will contribute $33.6 billion worth of imports: chemicals, automotive components, bicycle parts, agro based items, handicrafts. I mean, seriously, we want Chinese handicrafts, drug formulations, cosmetics, the less said, the better, electronics, and leather based goods. India is the world's sixth largest chemical manufacturer and is responsible for 15.6 billion of worth exports annually. Yet India's annual chemical related imports are in the vicinity of $10.2 billion. So we spent $10.2 billion to make $15.6 billion. And that is the problem that we face today, right? And this is because of the globalization and our vision as far as where we wanted to take the Indian manufacturing, let's say about 10 years ago. Now, let's talk about certain things that this particular company has mentioned. They talk about what are the things with the import FY20 and what targets should be there in terms of reducing the impact. Now, dairy is a big thing because let me tell you, all the ice cream factories within India, large ice cream factories that produce these cones and this and that, they all work on Chinese equipment. I know from first hand experience. So there is a lot which actually happens at the back end, which we don't know. So these are the things that this company has actually put across and said we need to start reducing our you know impact towards China. Fertilizers is one thing, has reduced because India has switched a lot to Belarus and Russia in terms of buying fertilizers, but a lot of consumer electronics needs to come down. There is just no question. The rate at which we do all this stuff, there is a responsibility that India also has with regards to this. Now, the last slide I have for you, which I'm going to tell you what I think about this entire thing. This, ladies and gentlemen, is not an overnight game as we think. Bunker, do. No, it can't happen. We'll damage ourselves. We need it till we set up our own base. There is no question that we need to understand the reality of life rather than speaking from emotions. I see a lot of tweets telling across, oh, India can't even reduce its trade from China. Kya ladoge tum isse? I mean, some of these things are so ill-informed. That's one of the reasons I thought, let me just do some a show on this, where I put across that it's not like that. There is a lot that we don't know. Remember, this stuff can also be weaponized by us. We gave a very clear example with TikTok and whole other things. India has also banned low-end phones coming in from China because our own industry is picked up. So there is a lot which we've also done and which we can weaponize. As I said before, China is not going to be able to find such a huge importer overnight. And that's something that we need to understand. Customer is always a king. That's something we need to understand. China is sinking. They will need our trade going forward. We are not. We're going up. So we need to keep going further up, taking advantage of China. And let me say that very clearly. We need to go up, taking advantage of China and what it offers us for our own growth. I am not buying stuff from China because I like China or I have a secret deal with Xi Jinping. No, we are buying stuff from China for our own consumption, for our own use within our industries. Of course, I don't buy the thing that we are buying cosmetics and consumer electronics and stuff like that. That we'll talk about. It's a great push to Atmanirbharta. Now, since you have a threat, you've realized this thing is there, you need to kind of understand this is something that we need to do today. We need to realize as citizens, this is the real thing. This is the real gambit of the game. It is not the way we actually get portrayed in our news media. And I'm sorry, I always say this, narratives are well built, but when you get spun up in your own narrative within, which is what happens in our media today, then you're not going to be able to analyze anything. And you'll need platforms like mine and a lot many others, as a matter of fact, who do great job in telling us details of what we are not told in newspapers and the electronic media. Now, the entire thing is also about decoupling from China, which is actually happening. A lot of countries are speaking about, no, no, we will not buy this from China, we will not do this. US has done a lot in terms of decoupling with China, who's the biggest trade partner of China. So that tells you something. So decoupling with China is a reality. Now, when that reality actually sets in, China will need to hold on to whatever sales is going to get. Slowing economy, ravaging COVID, a megalomaniac as a leader, wages going up, economy, your real estate going bust, your whatever little setup that you had done for your COVID, that is gone bust. Your vaccines are not getting sold. You're spending tons and tons on your military. Where do you get the money from? Now, a lot of you will say, oh, he's got dollar bonds, he's got a large cash reserve. Why you can't spend your cash reserves like that? I mean, India has got $600 billion in cash reserves. It's not that we just walk into France today and just buy the entire Rafale factory off and come back and say, "Bhai, paise bahut hai hamare paas." It cannot happen. Realities are a little more different. Chinese manufacturers are approaching India. As I said, they should tell us something with regards to the competitive nature of China, which is going to take a beating going forward. Because if the Chinese need to keep their head above water, they need to have their own people becoming a market, which currently is not. They've lost a lot of their money within their real estate sector. A lot of Chinese people have lost money. You can imagine they've invested in a house and that pricing went down in the dump with the real estate market. What do? Plus, you've had lockdowns, you've had, you know, decoupling and this and that. So your output, factory outputs are dropping. Your economy is kind of stagnating. The Chinese will have to hold on to whatever it gets. And of course, if the Chinese are looking at India, well, that tells you that we are getting a little more competitive in certain sectors, albeit, of course, cell phone manufacturing being at the top of the list. Now, this is where I have a bit of a challenge. What is our role as citizens, the viewers watching now, and the people that are going to watch the show later on? What is our role? Have we looked at the products and say, is this China made? Should I buy it or not? Of course, this is. Let me be fair. I am waiting for the iPhone coming into India so that I can replace my old one. But how many of us are going to choose an Indian product, paying a little extra, over a Chinese where we pay a little less? A lot of us will say, yeah, we didn't buy Diwali lights and this and that. That's one example. Thank you so much for that. Perfect. Great. What else? Have you and I done something to change our behaviors when we actually look at things online? You know, a lot of us buy these little electronic trinkets that we like, this thing, that thing, this measure, pedometer, ye meter, wo meter, all of that is made in China. So if it's not essential, as consumers, we need to look at something. Do we really need it? And is there anywhere else it is made? Buy it from any other country. Japan, Korea, Vietnam, so many other places are manufacturing, not from China. Tariffs, as far as government is concerned, I think this was also mentioned by Major General Rajiv Narayanan. You know, when I'm sitting in the same setup, I just clicked me. He said tariffs on non-essentials must be started. It must be done so that this silliness of buying these little trinkets would reduce because the prices will start going up. And the biggest point which I need to say is infrastructure, infrastructure, and infrastructure. And let us as citizens maintain it and not damage it. You guys know what I'm talking about. Vande Bharat Express getting stone pelted. Yeah, keep the damn politics away from my country. Yeah, keep it away from my infrastructure where I need to travel, where you need to travel as citizens. Let's not do this to ourselves. And this is something which I have a serious problem with. One of the biggest reasons why I don't talk about politics within India is because it is dirty. It is untouchworthy today. Because of politics, we do things like breaking highways, burning highways, damaging bridges, damaging railway lines, damaging trains, doing all sorts of nefarious activities to this without realizing the impact a delayed train actually has on a certain supply chain. It's important for us as Indians to play our part within the game of ensuring that our country is stabilized and is growing in the pace that we are today. It has to be a whole of nation approach, and there is no way else out. Thank you so much, guys. This is what I wanted to say before I get into your questions and comments. Please do like this video. Like. I can't see much likes on my dashboard, so please, everybody, just touch. It's just a small little touch. I'm not asking you to stop buying Chinese right now. All I'm saying is just touch the screen. And of course, yes, if you have not subscribed, you're new to the channel, please do subscribe. We do a show every night on important geopolitics for us to understand what's happening around the world and, of course, what's happening with India. If you can, do contribute. The code is right here. You can just scan it, and that directly connects to the UPI, or you can actually join us to become a member or send us super stickers and super chats. Thank you so much for your patronage. Right, we need more granular details and numbers on what percentage imports from Western MNCs operations from China. So that's a lot of data. I kind of have that. If you want, I can share it with you. Connect with me on email, which is there in the description. I'll be happy to share with you. On that note, guys, I've put in the links to my WhatsApp group as well as my Telegram group within the description. So all you need to do is go click there and you'll be able to join the groups right there. Now, imports from Western MNCs, sir, there are a lot of imports. For example, iPhones. A lot of them are made in China and imported in India. There is a whole lot. But understand one thing, when we import something like that, it counts as trade from China. So, yeah, we can look for a little bit of a median point here and there, but there is a bit of a challenge that we need to understand. Jai Bharat, Jai Hind. Bala, thank you so much. You're there every day wishing, saying Jai Bharat, Jai Hind is really encouraging. Thank you so much. Sir, Pharma API, there is a lot of raw material which is used in auto copper ink imported. Government should also help MSME to reduce regulations and make it large scale manufacturing more profitable. That's what you're trying to say. Your view, sir, I absolutely agree with you, because you need to ensure that profitability for the local manufacturer actually goes up. We need to understand this whole thing, and we need to also look at the factor that today, if they need to buy stuff from China and keep their businesses up till the time the local infrastructure and the local supply chains are not set up, let us continue with what we are doing. A systematic issue in India is our business is dominated by trading castes who prefer trading businesses other than manufacturing or services, so HSS is higher. Mandar, absolutely agree with you. I'll tell you a small story. That's how the Chinese actually capture your market. Now, back in the day when India was opening up, they and the Chinese were kind of building up the manufacturing base. They used to send their emissaries within India. They would find a trading community. They would get them to China. Luxury aircraft, this and that, luxury hotels, gifts, this, that, and the other. They would do all that stuff to ensure that there's a certain loyalty that was bought within India. Chinese influence operations within India, mind you. And that's what they did. So a lot of the people had contacts from China. All they did was pick up the हाँ भाई ये भेज दे. It was as simple as that. And the Chinese said, जी sir, हम अभी भेज देते हैं. Tuck, the damn thing was here. So the Chinese also delivered, as a matter of fact. There's not reports of Chinese not being able to produce and this and that. They delivered to the manufacturers, to the traders. something that we need to change as a culture. And there's no two questions about it. But I agree with you, Mandar, what you're saying. Good evening, sir. I'm sure India is very good in metal processing, but we're still depending on China because of price. So certain types of alloys and certain types of metals you still need to import because the industry is not fully set up in India. A lot of work is happening in the heavy industry sector within India. There's no question. I think within the next 2 3 years we are going to see a change. Guys, see, there was a lot of data that I found. I could not put all of that because this presentation would have gone on, and I didn't want to do that. API industry died in India due to government policy mismanagement. I told you which policy it was as well. It was a policy kept with probably the right interest, but had the wrong impact. Samsung's biggest phone factory is in India, so it's not a surprise Chinese company wants to do the same. I can't say anything more, sir. Thank you so much for explaining that. Emotions are that we can't sustain an economy and trade shock. Cold, clear thinking says we can better absorb shocks in peacetime than wartime. Absolutely correct, but why should we absorb the shock right now? We don't have a war. The Chinese are not going to hit us anywhere anytime soon. There are going to be these small little standoffs here. And when I say small little, it's, with all due respect, standoffs which will continue happening. But that should not stop us from actually growing our own economy to a certain point when we are resilient. A lot of people actually talk about that resilience point to be $5 trillion. There's a reason why Japan and Germany are below 5 trillion, because once you go above that, a country kind of becomes a rolling stock, and the growth accelerates after a certain time. We must target sectors and create shocks so that domestic sector increases. Absolutely, as I said, consumer products which are non-required essentials, you can do stuff. There is no question. There's a gap there. Very nicely said, sir. There's a lot of stuff the government has to hide due to our people not being mature enough to understand this information. Well, I don't know about that, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff that happens in the back door. Importantly, we must understand that we must actually look at an analysis with regards to, we must look at an analysis to figure out how this game is going to go forward. Because at the end of it, if we actually talk through just, oh yeah, China ke saath Indian government kuch nahi kar rahi, this that, that's a half-hearted kind of a this thing, and that's more to do with rhetoric rather than reality. As a citizen of this country, all we can do is stay calm, trust the government and not the party. Well, yes, but also question, analyze, read, interpret, some things that we need to do today. A lot of the things, let me assure you this, and let me say this with all humility, the government is doing a great job, but they're also doing a great job because they know a lot of people are watching them. So we need to keep a track. You can't just blindly, say, bhai, karo jo karna hai and all that stuff. Phones and appliances, LG, Samsung are made in India from last 5 years now. Yes, sir. There is a bit of a change which is happening in terms of the game. These are big ticket items, but people are choosing Chinese phones these days. Even appliances, Motorola, Realme, washing machines. The, sir, money is everything. There's no question. I mean, think about it. When you want to buy something, you would after some time say, "Yaar, nahi yaar, ठहर जा yaar. Let me kind of see if it's expensive or this and that." And that's the consumer behavior. All I'm trying to say is, as far as possible for non-essential goods, let's try and avoid it. And that's a message that I'd like to give out through my particular channel. Like the video and bell icon. Thank you so much, Mandar Saab. Thank you so much. Great work. Thank you so much, sir. Our government is still buying nuclear reactors parts from Chinese. Goodness me, are they really serious for decoupling? See, there are okay. Let me. I also actually got a little bit of a shock when I read this, but let me make you understand. There are loads of parts, thousands and millions of parts of nuclear reactors. Certain things are very basic, like meters, like gauges and stuff like that. The Chinese make some very good quality gauges and this and that. So that's something that we need to understand. And we've been buying these things, but predominantly the basic technology of nuclear reactors and stuff like that is Indian. And let me show you that. I went through the data and I realized what is being bought are these, little things which are not being manufactured in India. Not nuclear, I think electricity power sector. No, sir, nuclear also, there are certain parts. Electricity power sector, yes, a lot of the transformers actually come from China. They've been able to do it pretty well, and their electricity grid is very good. There's no question about it. They barely have any power shutouts and stuff like that within China. So that's something that we need to acknowledge and learn from. For friend, learning must never stop. Thanks so much, guys. I've actually enjoyed doing this research. It was a little more technical other than geopolitics. This was something that I wanted to put across because I see these frustrated tweets going across where people are saying, ये तो हम कर नहीं सकते, लड़ेंगे क्या? भाई लड़ भी लेंगे, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, गोलियां हम नहीं लेते. We are not Taiwan who sends their rockets to China to get repaired. We're not that, and we're not the Americans who buy their alloys for their F-35 fighters from China. We don't do stuff like that. I think that's where some amount of maturity has come in within the Indian government and Indian setup. But yes, there will be vulnerabilities that we need to recognize. There will be issues that will come forward in the future. Let me also make a prediction. This trade will go up. It will go further up. It is important for us to understand it is not all bad, right? So let's not kind of go get into that thinking, oh, bhai, ye trade ja raha hai. Deficit, okay, this trade deficit so called, it's hardly anything. We've got the reserves for it. It's not much. So let's not kind of beat around the bush. We must look at, I think, Shritik, I'm going to take this comment. Jan Shankar says, I think we've discussed this on the channel. It's not necessary to manufacture every little thing in India. And thank you so much for putting it across very nicely. And I think I'm glad that me, General Shankar, all of us have been able to get this point across. We need to target the critical first. It's the APIs, it's the electronics that is being consumed by us, it's the iron ore, it's the whole list of things that I showed you there, which are critical to India's growth, must be looked at first. And that's a very, very good comment. Thank you so much. So, as I said, guys, before sign off, like, subscribe, and if you can, do contribute. The code is right here. I'm still trying to figure this out. So, sorry if I'm looking like a fool. But yeah, you can just scan this and send us a direct contribution, become a member, join, or thanks, super thanks, or super chats. Follow me on Telegram, WhatsApp, or Twitter. Links are there in the description box. If you want to, please do get in touch with me. My email address is there. I normally take about a day to respond because thankfully, and I'm happy about it, there are so many people writing emails. It's heartening because a lot of people want to share information, a lot of people want to ask stuff, a lot of people just want to get connected. And that's something which is very heartening to me. It tells me that I'm doing the right thing. Of course, the race is always there. The channel needs to grow, so I need your help to spread the word, tell people who are interested in geopolitics, and straight factual discussions rather than rhetoric of Pakistan tod denge and ye kar denge and wo kar denge and all that. We talk facts on this channel. We talk sans the rhetoric with experts who've done a lot in their lives. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. Till tomorrow night for another interesting episode. Jai Hind.